Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, and we have a very, very special guest with us, Mr. Kyle Kotary.
Thank you very
Kyle,
much.
can I call you Kyle?
Yes,
over
you
here?
can.
And he's the town board on the town of Bethlehem's board, and therefore we want to check in about what Bethlehem's doing, and also, obviously you have other jobs, other interests, but we'll get to that in a second over here. So maybe just to start off, it's been about 8 years since that you've been in the board. What's like probably, maybe you say, looking back, your biggest achievement or accomplishment?
Well, I think as a board, and I am still on the board and one of 5, so I think of it as a collective. We have accomplished a lot over the last 8 years. And it's hard to pick one, but I think in a few different areas, we made a lot of progress in terms of planning. During my tenure, we implemented the town's first comprehensive plan. We did an open space and farmland protection planning. We improved our zoning and planning board processes, and we did a lot of regulatory, I'll say, upgrades to match the comprehensive plan. So I think we did a lot in terms of planning and development, both to encourage it, but also with an eye on what kind of community we want to grow into in the future. I think we did a really good job managing the fiscal crisis. Not only was corporate America and were individuals and families squeezed by the Great Recession, but it also hurt local governments as sales tax declined and other types of revenues declined. So too, our budget revenue declined. And I think that, again, as a group, I work with 4 different town supervisors and probably close to 10 or 12 different town board members over the years. I think we all contributed to a solid effort to manage our town's finances.
Excuse me from ignorance, and I feel ignorant because I've been living in Bethlehem for 25 years, but just what's to say, is it like the board, like a Congress, they can veto something or they introduce legislation? How does the system work?
Rabbi, that's a great question. I equate the town board to a board of governors for a nonprofit or a private organization, where the town supervisor is both the chief operating officer or the chief executive officer, as well as the chairman or chairperson of the board. So the supervisor has day-to-day management duties and supervises all of the town's departments. However, the budget is created by the entire board, 5-person board. Everybody has an equal vote. So while the supervisor has that CEO role, they are one of 5 voting members of a board which decides budget, which decides policy and direction for the town. So those high-level decisions are made by the group.
Oh, very good. All right, so that's important to know how the system works.
Absolutely.
And how does it divide it between Democrats and Republicans? Because you've been around for a long time. I remember the year that the city went from, I've been here for, like I say, 25 years, kind of went from Republican to Democrat.
Kind of.
Yeah. and we've seen that shift here in Bethlehem. I was a part of the, the second board. I was elected in 2005, and in 2003, the Democrats, for all intents and purposes, took control of the board. We had the town's first Democratic town supervisor in Teresa Egan, with Dan Plummer, and then also at the time former town board member and Assemblyman Tim Gordon, who was a member of the Independence Party but cross-endorsed by the Democrats and voted along with the Democrats. The following election, 2005, is the first time that we had a full majority of enrolled Democrats. And I think things pretty much stayed the same. It's been interesting. There's been a lot of cross-pollination or cross-endorsement over the years. I think for the most part, though, it's pretty much a Democratic town, but I do think that it's important to have a strong and quite frankly, in New York State, where we have multi-party systems, I think that that's important. I think it's important for people to have, with different views, to have different outlets through various elected officials, and it's all good. So I think right now, although we currently have I believe 4 registered Democrats and 1 registered Independent Party member in Joanne Dawson. I do think we do a good job of listening to people of all political persuasions and parties.
So I was curious, since you brought this up about the Democrat, did you see a shift in policy from the Republicans to the Democrats, or was it because I noticed over the years that I've been involved with politics, is that the R and the D, the blue and the red, they mean more on the national level than on the state or the local level. So, is that just in theory, or have you really seen a change, a shift in policy?
Well, I agree with you. I think you're right, and I think at the local level, those of us who are involved in local government and particularly in local office, we hope that there's little to no politics involved at the local level. That people really truly are interested and elected the best and most qualified individuals, and that the issues that we're focusing on, infrastructure, parks, that those types of issues really no philosophical distinctions or divisions.
Right, there's no Republican or Democrat way to pave a road.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, that is in theory, and I will say in terms of governing the town, I haven't seen a big change. I think that looking back now, especially with 8 years of perspective, I respect those who, regardless of party, who served our town. When the majority of the town board was Republican, I think they did a very good job of managing the town, and with our now Democratic majority, I would hope that people see us doing the same things. I think where there may be a slight difference is around a few issues like land use planning. I think that's where you get into a little bit more of perhaps the philosophy of government in terms of
business
land
versus
use. Well, not even so much business versus commercial property versus private, as much as what value does your community and your community leadership place on things like open space, for an example. Okay, I do see some differences.
Democrats are more in favor of more open space.
For the most part. For the most part. Although I think, again, one of the refreshing aspects of local government is I think people certainly feel freer, and I hope that they do, feel freer to express their personal beliefs as opposed to towing the party line. And sometimes, everybody gets caught up when you're involved in party politics, particularly around a campaign season. You kind of get in line with certain messages or certain priorities. But at the end of the day, I think that over the course of various political party majorities, I think our town is actually pretty lucky. We're a government town. We're a professional town. We have a lot of people who live in town who have worked in state government or still do in their day jobs, as I do. There are a lot of people who have studied, who have covered state politics or county politics. So I think we're very fortunate in the town of Bethlehem, and I think other communities in the capital region, that we have an incredible number of very talented, experienced people in the business of government. And I think that is why a lot of people throughout the state, those who research and study or cover local government, look to Bethlehem as a leader, whether it's, again, our planning, I think our highway department has been considered one of the top highway departments in the state. I think we have an excellent, award-winning seniors program, a private-public collaborative that is well-known throughout the community, the area. So we do a lot of those things.
Seniors are a strong voting bloc. I mean,
absolutely.
It's always been said they look forward to Election Day because that's the one day where they can get out and actually feel like a productive member of society, as opposed to being in an assisted living home or something like that. They're looking forward to, that's their duty. That's what they need to do. But what I find out with local politics is that it's more of a personality. It's more of a likability contest. That no one ever really knows their elected official. They know, oh, that's a nice young man who came. He was he's a good-looking boy, or he's a that's a good-looking woman who's who's and it's more of a personality
Sure.
type of thing. I like that. They came to my door and they smiled and they were really friendly and they kissed my baby and they were made me feel so comfortable. As opposed to the mean grouch who might come to the door with a chip on his shoulder,
Right.
and they go, I don't want him in there, So it becomes less ideological, but it's more of a personality contest.
It can be.
Did you? Well, you were campaigning, quite a bit, and
yeah, I still think what's interesting though is that even at the local level, I saw on a very, very small scale. Campaigns and electoral processes that were very similar to the larger scale. Over the years, I've seen campaigns. I've been in campaigns where there's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of mudslinging. I've also been in campaigns that were at least to the public snoozers that nobody really paid attention because the issues are straightforward. The candidates presented themselves, and there wasn't a lot of controversy on the issues, or a lot of fighting between the candidates. So
acrimony or something.
Yeah, exactly. I really think it depends. One of the big differences, and although the only elected position I've ever been in is at the town board, I've worked at local, state, and federal levels, and just working with elected officials at those different levels. A major difference is at the local level, people have an incredible amount of access, especially with today's technology, right? I get emails every day, I get texts, I get tweets from Twitter,
right.
Facebook, requests, opinions. People call. People will catch you at Stewart's or at Price Chopper. They'll catch you in your community organizations. They'll catch you just about anywhere. So it's interesting the number of people who can reach you. In a small community, it's a little bit different on both sides. People have access to you, but also everywhere you go, you're definitely available to people. So
now you brought up the state, local, and federal positions, so I just want to give the audience a little bit of your background.
Sure.
You have a BA in Government and Economics from Hamilton College.
That's right.
You just got that a couple of years ago?
Yeah, a few years ago.
You have an MPA, which is a Master's of Public Administration at the Maxwell School, Syracuse University, and State and Local Finance was your concentration.
That's right.
So you really got into this finance thing, and basically John Clarkson, the supervisor, he worked in the state budget office. So do you see eye to eye on the budgetary issues with him?
Actually, on a lot of issues.
Because you're both expert.
And a lot of issues we do. And as a matter of fact, John and I worked together in the state controller's office. As a matter of fact, we met each other in 2002 when I moved into the community from Washington, D.C. I had been working in the Clinton administration. At that point, at the end of the administration for the Department of Health and Human Services, working as a special assistant under another Syracuse alum, Dr. Shalala, and came up here to work in the state controller's office. So, John and I have, and we're not the only ones, as a matter of fact, everybody on our board has some level of state expertise.
Yeah, but you specifically having that government and finance background is very close paralleling John Clarkson's background also.
Yeah, absolutely. We share a lot of the same experiences, and I think we have a lot of the same ideas. And actually, when it comes to our budget, although we've had differences, I voted against a couple of budgets, both one of his and also a previous supervisor's. I think that we share common philosophies in the following. One, we both believe that the intent of government is to provide services to a community, particularly those services that it might not make the most sense for the private sector to provide. We believe in doing it in a fiscally responsible way. We also believe that you have finance and auditing rules for a reason. And when you start with a basic philosophy, I think it's easy in a common ground. It's easier to start heading in the right direction. Both of us in the last two budgets that we worked on together believe strongly in trying to keep the tax rate down. I really pushed to keep it down close to zero, and therefore in the last budget I voted against it because I thought the tax increase was too much, especially in a single year, especially just coming off the Great Recession. But at the end of the day, I think having that experience has been very helpful, but I've also learned a lot in this job. And it's like any job, no matter, you bring in your own set of experiences, academic and life and professional experiences, but there's also a lot of on-the-job training that goes on. And we have issues that I think are particular, financial and other issues that have been particular to local government. And we were also hit with some sudden surprises, like trying to deal with Hurricane Irene impacts. Just as a quick example, we've estimated that will, at the end of our recovery process, and we're still accepting funds, rebuilding our dam, rebuilding some of our infrastructure, that could be somewhere between $5 and $10 million. I mean, it's hard to put a price tag on.
But it's in that range.
And that's huge. That's, somewhere around, maybe as much as 25% of a single year budget. To be hit with that in a storm that obviously you're not expecting, you have to realign your priorities, and you still have to pay for all the services that you provide on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. Well, you got to accommodate those unforeseen circumstances.
The governor is now famous for saying we have these 100-year storms every 3 years.
That's right.
However, these 100-year storms are happening not in the same place. They're happening in different places.
That's
so
right.
There are 100 year storms for the place that it hit,
right.
not just that it's every 3 years. I'm going to get him on that one time. I'm going to try to see what he has to say about that.
There you go.
But you did work for the Comptroller's office. You also worked in New York State Senate Communications, which I have that
That's
same
right. We share that
background.
similar path.
That's right.
Yep.
You also worked as a deputy press secretary for Pat Moynihan.
Yep.
And you also worked on Al Gore's campaigns and in his vice presidential office.
That's right.
What did you do in the vice presidential office?
I did a lot of different things.
Well, just quickly, just some of the things.
Sure. I did a lot of advance work during that time period.
Which means you arrived at the location ahead of time
that's right.
and made sure that it was all set up so he could just walk on stage, make his speech, and then leave.
You got it.
Okay.
Logistics, security, and within that, there are different departments. So on the official side, during the administration, one is primarily working through the State Department. On the campaign side, you're in my case, I was either working for the DNC or for in '96 the Clinton-Gore campaign, in 2000 the Gore-Lieberman campaign. But whether it was official or political travel, you're kind of divided into different teams. Some do security, some logistics, some press, some policy, some local government relations, and I had an opportunity to do all of those. That's why I say, I experienced a lot. I ended up always coming back to press,
okay.
whether it was my work in Washington, my work here, or some of the campaign or traveling work through the State Department.
Which I find is interesting because in Syracuse you weren't a journalism major.
I did not go to Newhouse. I went to Maxwell. That's right.
And you didn't do anything that had to deal with the press, and you were, lack of a better word, a numbers geek.
Yeah.
And then you went into this PR gig, and I mean, how did you? Most people who are in finance don't know how to write
right.
as well. I mean, where did that all come from? That you had this desire to break out of the numbers and to get into the wordsmithing?
I could probably trace that back to two specific time periods. One, going back to college. I admittedly was not a very good writer, and I had an English professor who I think gave me a couple of C's and D's on the first papers of the semester. And she took an interest in me, knew that I could write better. I knew that I could write better, both creatively but also professional writing. And I had I had a lot of success in a couple of related courses. For an example, I did very well in public speaking, and I did well in some other courses. So she was determined to take me from a C, D writing student to a B or even an A student. And in one semester, she made an impact. So I went from dreading writing to loving writing. So that was the first incident. And I actually told that story in an interview for the position of Deputy Press Secretary for the late, great Daniel Patrick Moynihan, whom I adored and loved, and that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I did a couple of different jobs in his office, but primarily that press experience, which is created, a great foundation for future public relations and communications work. But he also was the ultimate professor and teacher, constantly teaching. And he used to not only edit or comment on the press releases I would write for him, but he would grade them. and
you got B's and A's?
And, well, I did pretty well. By the time I got to him, I was doing pretty well.
He was a professor before him?
He was absolutely. He was a professor at Harvard. He was a professor, got his PhD, and I believe did some teaching at Tufts. And he also, another Syracuse connection, he did some teaching before and after his time in the U.S. Senate at Syracuse University. As a matter of fact, one of my fondest memories of my time associated with Senator Moynihan was actually after the senator had passed away, folks came together and raised some money and dedicated the Moynihan Institute at Syracuse University. And so I go to this event, and I had forgotten just how many outstanding people had worked for the man, and names in media from Lawrence O'Donnell to Tim Russert and other folks. Senator Hillary Clinton was there. So it ran the gamut of who's who in media.
And he didn't care what the party affiliation was. When you worked for his shop, you worked for his shop, regardless.
Absolutely.
And most people, he talked about Hell's Kitchen all the time, growing up in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, but he lived in Delaware County in a place called Davenport Center. Well, Pinder's Corners. Pinder's Corners, right, which is in Davenport. But if you go on I-88, if you notice the road slants down and then up, well, there was a deal between Warren Anderson and Moynihan that the road Davenport Center Road is right near Pinder's Corners. So he wanted the road to go close enough to his house, and then his district office was in Oneonta, which is the next exit. So that's why the road is shaped the way it is, because 90% of the funding for I-88 was federal, and then it was named for Anderson because he got the other 10% from the state. So there you have the two put together, and then Warren Anderson, of course, is from Binghamton, and the road goes from Schenectady to Binghamton.
And that's why roads are not always in a straight line.
That's right. And I want to tell a quick Moynihan story, if I could also. I had a chance to be at one of his Friday news conferences, which he rarely let anyone who wasn't part of the Washington Press Corps in, and he let me in. And I got to see how he conducts his news conference. So there was the senior person of the Washington Press Corps from the Watertown Daily Times. And the guy asked him a question. He says, "Sir, you have to read this book." And he stands up and he takes the book off the shelf, and your answer is in this book. And the guy the reporter, who's quite, in his 60s or whatever at the time, said, we'll open up. He goes, "Well, excuse me, Senator, but this is in Mandarin? Then learn Mandarin, and then you'll have your answer." But there it is.
That's right.
And that's his professorial, and he was always, I really enjoy it. And his wife, Liz, was absolutely phenomenal. She used to write notes to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but she used to write notes to me. So anyway, that was my reminiscence also of the great late senator. And then you also started your own public affairs group called Empire Public Affairs for a while. So
That's right.
You brought your business, your PR experience, your finance experience, and all to learn how to survive in a down economy. And, you started your own business.
That's right. Yeah, I've touched a lot of the bases in government and
you're only 44.
and communications.
I'm telling you, you did a lot in those
Yeah,
short years?
I was very fortunate. I started young, and I got involved in government and public service at an early age. I often tell the story. My late grandfather was a public servant for over 50 years at the local and county level in Oneida County in central New York, which is where I grew up. And
What town?
In the town of Floyd,
Okay.
just outside of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a town supervisor, a town board member, a highway superintendent for about 30 years, county legislator, chairman of the board of county legislators before they had a county executive. Actually, he was very instrumental in creating that county executive position in that county. But I remember as a young child, 2-3 years old,
Mm-hmm.
campaigning with him, and some of my earliest memories were, sitting at neighbors' kitchen tables, going to the local park, or going to the local diner, and making the rounds with him and handing out his. He didn't have a whole lot of campaign literature. Most of his campaigns were hand to hand, as he used to say. But I saw what he did, and he did a lot for people, and did a lot for his community over the years, and spent a lot of time. I mean, this was a guy who used to get up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to check his roads, and then end up not going back to bed, and sometimes would put 24 hours in, much like our recently retired Greg Sagendorf.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg and I have a great personal and professional relationship, in part because I had a special place in my heart for highway
That's right.
superintendents, and he and I often shared some nice stories, and I used to tell him a lot of the things that my grandfather did and went through, and Greg had gone through those as well. So that's how I got involved in this whole thing. And then, as I said, experiences in Washington, Albany, and then here locally I've been fortunate to have some good opportunities and to work with some great people, which is really important.
It is. It really is. It really helps when you got good people to work with, or great people to work with.
That's right.
But I just wanted to ask you, as we're, as you're wrapping up another segment of your very, very varied life here, what are you going to miss from being, if anything, from being on the town board? You obviously have a young family. You're obviously going to be able to spend more time with your family and your wife, and that's all great. But what are you going to miss about that people interaction? That person to person.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
You're not going to miss the meetings, I guess.
especially some of those 6-hour budget marathons.
Right.
I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I will remain very much involved in our community. So I don't anticipate not having that direct interaction with friends, neighbors, colleagues. I have, as you pointed out, young kids. So I'm involved as a coach, or as a board member, or as a supporter of many of the area's youth organizations, athletics and otherwise.
Well, you're involved with the YMCA, the Chamber of Commerce, the Historical Society, Voyage 400 Committee. I mean, you had, there's all those boards.
I've done a lot. So I think the part of public service that I'll probably miss the most is having that immediate and direct impact. When people come to you and they have a problem, at least having a shot of being able to solve it for them, at least having the ability to take it back to the town government, to work on people's issues, to be a direct voice for change. But that doesn't mean that that I or other colleagues in local government should all of a sudden step away and out completely. And I don't plan on doing that. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever run again for anything. I might. Never say never. But I can guarantee one thing, and that is that I'll always be an active member of the community. I love this town. I love our community, and quite frankly, anywhere that I've lived over the years, I've taken a role, and it's just that this role or this next stage may be a little bit different.
Did you leave after 2 terms because you felt that maybe it was term limits, or that you just had enough of it, or why now? Why are you leaving now?
Well, a couple different reasons. I think 8 years on the town board is a long time. It was an opportunity to do a lot, and I think it's time to let somebody else go. We could probably have another 30-minute discussion on
Okay.
term limits
Okay.
and the electoral process, elected versus appointed. But without getting into that, for me personally, I think 8 years is a long time. I think it was time to give somebody else a chance. And really, for me, the decision was a family decision first and foremost. For me to be able to spend more time watching my kids' concerts and sporting events, and spending more time with my young family right now. And like I said, maybe get back into it at some
Okay.
point.
Well, Kyle, thank you. Appreciate it.
So thank you. We probably could spend another half hour, but we're out of time. So I want to say thank you, Kyle Kotary, and also a blessing
you,
for
Thank you,
you're a
Rabbi,
young
certainly.
person with a lot of ambition, a lot of achievement, and you have a full life ahead of you. And then we give you want to watch your success. So come back on the Jewish View, and of course we
Thank
have
you.
almost practically a co-host. Mark Ronich is always on, and now a new business with the JBiz.
TechValley.com. Yes.
TechValley.com, and we wish you success also, and thank you for all our viewers.